The views and opinions expressed on all radio shows broadcast on Tom's Radio Toronto are entirely those of the hosts, guests, and callers who are entirely responsible for all show content and do not in any way reflect the opinions of Tom's Radio Toronto or its staff. These broadcasts are presented and made public as entertainment and general information only, in the hope that they will be entertaining and informative to listeners. They are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or mitigate in any way any disease or condition, or to promote any specific lifestyle, belief, religion, political affiliation, or other personal practice, nor is the information presented necessarily accurate or verifiable.
Good evening and welcome to the Hoffman Law Show on Tom's Radio, where every week we bring you new areas of law, we discuss different areas of law, and answer all of your legal questions. My name is Jennifer Hoffman. I am your host, and I am also the principal lawyer of Hoffman Law. We are a personal injury and disability law firm, and we deal with all matters related to injury or any type of disability that you may have sustained. I have with me tonight a very special guest. Her name is Aisling Bondi. Miss Bondi is the principal lawyers of Bondi Law, an immigration law firm. Welcome to the show, Aisling.
Thank you very much.
And tonight she'll be giving us a lot of information about the practice of immigration and some of the laws and rules respecting litigation in Canada. Aisling, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your practice?
Yes, sure. So I've been practicing for around 15 years, exclusively in the field of immigration law, immigration and refugee law. Right now, our practice, we are 4 lawyers, and we practice in all areas of immigration and refugee law. So caregiver applications, economic immigration applications, family sponsorships, humanitarian, refugee, and litigation.
That's excellent. And you'll have to excuse me because I don't know much about immigration law. So this is why I bring the expert on.
I don't know much about disability and injury law, so you're fine.
There you go. There you go. And that's why we have lawyers specializing in different areas of practice. But from my limited knowledge of immigration, I know that there are lots of rules, and some of the immigration options and programs have changed over the past few years. Can you give us a little bit more information about that and what people can expect in terms of the immigration laws in Canada?
Yeah. There's significant changes happening always in the field of Canadian immigration law. Generally speaking, Canadian immigration law, there's, as I kind of referenced with our practice area, it's broken into different classes of immigration. So you have the refugee stream, there's humanitarian and compassionate stream, family class sponsorship. So persons can sponsor spouses, children of a certain age, parents, grandparents, and occasionally other family members. There's economic immigration that's based on usually person's education, work experience, and so on. And to an extent, there's some business class immigration as well, and some people can enter on a temporary basis as visitor, worker, student, also on a permanent basis. If we're looking specifically at caregiver programs, they have undergone a lot of change over the last few years, like really significantly. To give just a basic overview to help orient people, for many, many years in Canada, there was a program known as the Live-In Caregiver Program. Which a lot of people might still be familiar with. It no longer operates, but there's still a lot of people who came through that program who are kind of working their way through the system. And I think sometimes people are so familiar and aware of that, they don't realize how much we've shifted away from it. So the Live-In Caregiver Program, there was a requirement that a person would come to Canada come on a work permit that was tied to their employer. So they had to work for a specific employer. Their work permit did not permit them to work for anyone else. And they had to live in the employer's home where they were working as a caregiver. So they were really, really tied to the employer and the family they were working for. When they arrived in Canada, and they had to come onto Canada on a work permit that was issued through this program, they had 4 years to acquire 2 years of work experience and then apply for permanent residence. There were a lot of problems with the program, a lot of abuse, because if someone was living with a family where they were being mistreated in any way, they didn't have a lot of options. They couldn't work elsewhere. They couldn't even live outside of the home where they were working, because that would run afoul of the program. They had to stay and live there, and switching employers was an extremely cumbersome process. Also, if for some reason the person didn't get the 2 years work experience within 4 years, they could run afoul of the program, or if for any reason their work permit lapsed until they obtained permanent residence. Another issue we saw with the program was that someone would come under a work permit, work here for years, apply for permanent residence, and the caregiver would come on their own with their family being left back home. And then when they would apply for a permanent residence, they would discover that someone in their family was inadmissible for permanent residence, often because of a disability, a medical condition, but sometimes for other reasons. And this was really devastating, because usually people are coming to Canada for the purpose of later bringing their family here. And so if they come and work for 2 years and discover they couldn't do that, it could be really devastating. Why were you separated from your family if you don't have that ability to be reunited with them? Absolutely. So slowly over time, the program has begun changing. There's been a few iterations of them. There was a Caring for Children program, Caring for People with High Medical Needs program, which moved away from the live-in requirement. Now, where we're at, then there was a program called the Interim Pathway for Caregivers while we were shifting again. But now the situation where we've ended up is the Home Child Care Provider pilot, and also the Home Support Worker pilot. The requirements are essentially the same, but one has more to do with caregiving, so work with children, and the other is other forms of home support. These new programs, I'll go through the requirements. They address some of the flaws with the old program, with the live-in caregiver and others, but they have problems of their own at the same time. So how does this new program work? If a person is overseas and has not yet come to Canada to work, they need to have the support of an employer in Canada. And with the support of the employer, they would apply at the same time for permanent residence and for a work permit. To the worker who's applying needs to meet a few requirements. They need to show they have the ability to do the job in Canada that they're being offered. They need to pass an English test, and they need to have at least 1 year of completed post-secondary educational credential. So it has to be a completed credential. It can't be like 1 year of a 4-year program. They have to have graduated from a program of at least 1 year. If that program is not in Canada, they have to get an equivalency done of their studies by an agency in Canada. So there's quite a bit of work up front for the worker to have to get these documents, write the language test, and get the equivalence of their studies, and also find the job offer in Canada. So when they have all the documents, they apply, like I said. So the positive thing, now they're applying at the same time for permanent residence and for a work permit. So immigration is going to review the application and make that decision up front if they appear to qualify for permanent residence. So someone will come on a work permit and they'll only realize a few years later they don't qualify.
Sorry, are they not qualifying in and of themselves, or was the problem that certain family members just weren't eligible to come once they had a work permit?
That's what was often happening.
Permanent residence.
Yeah, that was what was happening before, is when they would apply for permanent residence, because even if you meet the work experience requirements and education and so on, you could be inadmissible in your family too for any number of reasons. Medical and disability came up a lot. That's often, there were some really heartbreaking stories in the media. It was a caregiver was reported, and one of her children had a hearing-related disability and was found to be inadmissible for that reason. So, like, ultimately, she and her family, I think they found a way to resolve it, but I mean, they had to go to the media, right? Like, this is what was happening. It could be, so it was a common one, but there could be other reasons too. Like if someone in the family had criminality, or if someone in the family worked in the government in a position that is considered to make them inadmissible. There are all sorts of reasons. So now that assessment happens up front. So immigration up front asks for all the family's documents to determine, do they appear to meet the eligibility. And eligibility, so like you have the language, the education requirement for permanent residence, but also admissibility. So they have everyone in the family do medical, provide police certificates to make sure that they are going to qualify, or it looks like they will qualify for permanent residence after the work experience requirement. And also on that point, the threshold for being medically inadmissible previously, and this is not just a caregiver program, this is across the board for immigration in Canada. If a person had a medical condition that required around, these are just approximate numbers, $6,000 a year in public health care costs, they could be inadmissible for medical reasons with immigration. Now the threshold is a bit over 20,000. Okay, so big change, and that affects all the classes. So people applying through under other economic programs. So there's more breathing space on that front, but also that assessment is happening up front. So there's no surprises after the family comes to Canada. So if that assessment is done, the immigration determines they meet the requirements, they will give the caregiver a work permit to come to Canada and work. But now another positive, the family gets permits as well. And when I'm talking about family, I'm always talking about spouse and children. So not like parents and siblings of the caregiver, but spouse and children. So now the whole family can come to Canada together up front. That's a big change from the past. It wasn't that way before. And the caregiver,
sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask, how long ago did this new program come into effect?
That's actually, it's been around 2 years. I don't have the exact date. I could check that, but we're looking around, it's within around the last 2 years or so. But some people, because there's been these various changes over time, when I speak with the caregiver, I always need to get their work permit to get a sense of what program they came under, because some people still came under previous iterations of the program. It's changed so much, but this one is around the last 2 years it's been in place. Yeah.
Obtaining their permanent residency, you'd recommend that they contact someone like you who can probably help assist and guide them through the process?
Absolutely, yes, and give individualized advice on what would make the most sense in their circumstances, for sure.
Okay, yeah. Before we go to a quick commercial break, do you want to tell us how we can reach you?
Oh, yes. So a few ways. My email, so it's my first name, AISLING @bondiimmigration.com. You can also go to our website, which is www.bondiimmigration.com. If you Google my name, if anyone's watching, you just search my name on Google, you should find my contact information pretty easily.
Great. Okay, so let's take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, Aisling is going to tell us more about the program and other immigration-related issues.
Our company is committed to providing truthful, honest, competent, and result-oriented service to advising and representing our clients in Canada and overseas in a wide range of immigration matters. We focus on providing support, building dependable relationships, and promoting success. We are dedicated to understanding what results you want, to helping you understand what actions we can take on your behalf.
Good evening and welcome back to the Hoffman Law Show. Tonight we have with us Aisling Bondi, who is spending the hour chatting with us about immigration law. She is the founding principal of Bondi Law. And just before a commercial break, we were talking about some of the changes that have come across over the past couple of years with respect to the caregiver program. I know that many of our viewers are very interested in this information, specifically as it pertains to this particular program. Quite a few of our listeners have written in and asked over the past few weeks about caregiver related questions. I mean, now I'm learning that it's no longer really referred to as the caregiver program. There's a new two new types of programs. So thank you, Aisling, for being here tonight. And just before the break, you were explaining that people now need to get pre-approved for the program and the PR. If someone is interested in coming to Canada through the caregiver program, do you have any advice on what they should do and how they should go about navigating the system, essentially?
Yes, definitely. So if someone is interested in coming through the program, they will need to have that 1 year post-secondary educational credential. So that's something that they might want to, if they don't already have, look at options for completing. In some cases, coming to Canada as an international student might be an option. It's tremendously expensive and requires, like, applying for a study permit. That might be an option for some. It might not be for others. And also writing and passing the English test. And what they need is, under the Canadian system, considered a level 5, which is like conversational English. It's not very advanced, but they do need to pass that test and also get the employment offer from an employer in Canada. That's really a vital piece, is securing the job offer here, because without that, the application won't move forward. You need to have the job offer to be able to apply through this program. And one of the complicating factors with this application process, and sorry, to touch back, so if immigration grants the work permit for the caregiver to come to Canada, they would come work for 2 years. And once they've completed 2 years of work experience, would notify immigration. Immigration then moves forward with finalizing the application for permanent residence. And the work permit they get to come to Canada, it's specific to working as a caregiver. So you can't come under the work permit and then work in another field, but it's not tied to the employer. So even though an employer needs to support the application, once the caregiver gets here, they can move on to work for another employer. They do have that flexibility, whether it's like just entirely changing employers or working for one or more employers. That's not an issue. And that's a big change from previous versions of the program, is that now the work permit is not specific to an employer. The difficulties with it, though, there's a few with this program. First, it's taking a really long time, like a really, really long time. If someone meets all the requirements, has the job offer and apply, it's right now the website is not posting processing times, but I spoke with some colleagues before tonight, and the kind of collective experience is taking well over a year.
Is this for the initial process before they even get approved or pre-approved to come to Canada?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is challenging if you're the caregiver overseas, but it's also challenging to find the job offer, because a lot of employers who need a caregiver need one now, not in 2 years, right? And so there's always a chance you might lose the job offer in the meantime, or have difficulty convincing an employer to go through this process, because they're saying, look, you go through this process, you have to file a job offer. I might be in Canada 2 years from now, and there's nothing sort of requiring me to continue working for you. So it is challenging.
That would be a big concern probably for a lot of employers, because as I understand it, there's also a pretty significant cost to the employer to do to go through the process, right? I think there's a cost associated with the LMIA, and the employer is also responsible for paying for transportation. And then there's no guarantee that the individual would be approved to come or stay with the employer for the entire duration of the work permit, as I understand it.
Yeah, the LMIA requirement is not there anymore. So now the employer just provides the job offer. They don't need to go through that process of trying to recruit someone to get a pre-authorization with Service Canada. So in that way, it's simpler, but there's a long waiting period. And the program has a cap every year. For caregivers, it's 2,750. For home support worker, it's the same number. The cap has already been filled for 2021. So if someone in Canada now is saying, oh, like I know this person overseas, I want to bring them as a caregiver, so they're going to have the caregiver is going to have to do English test, get the equivalents. Even if they've already completed 1 year post-secondary, they have to get it assessed by an agency in Canada. They file the application, so it takes a while to get the documents you need to file. And then you can't even file the application until 2022 right now, because it's maxed out for this year. The cap is reached, and it was reached in June. So about halfway through the year, it's filling up the program. And what I find with caps is that every year it's met sooner, right? Because now everyone who wanted to apply from June to December is waiting to apply in January of 2022. Yeah. So you get this like backlog of people waiting. So then if it's June this year, it could be like April next year, March the next year. Like immigration has a lot of programs with caps, and that's always the pattern we see, right? Every year it closes sooner. And so you have to wait till 2022, file the documents, and then you're waiting, a year plus just for immigration to approve and for the caregiver to be able to come to Canada. So it's going to be a program that works for some. It's not going to work for everyone, especially if an employer has an immediate need that like, I'm ready to go back to work. I need a caregiver here to stay with my child during the day. You can't wait on a year, and it's not even certain it's a year. There's a lot of uncertainty with the processing time. So there were a lot of great ideas with this program, but it's not really playing out the way that we had hoped, largely because of the delays and the cap on processing numbers.
And I imagine, this program's only been around for 2 years, so I guess it got implemented shortly before COVID hit. I imagine that COVID has also unfortunately had an impact on a lot of people in a lot of applications of individuals trying to get into the country.
It has. What I've seen in COVID is when it began, it affected everything. Everything was slowed down. And since then, it's become quite erratic. Like immigration all of a sudden will take a bunch of officers and put them on a certain application type. So we saw for a while, some work permit applications were going through really fast. Now they're really slowed down. Nothing was happening on sponsorship applications, spousal sponsorships. Now all of a sudden those are going through quickly. It's kind of like they realize we have a problem here and send officers to work on it. They're working from home, right? But have them focus on that. Processing times improve while something else gets slower. So right now, what I would say with COVID is the impact has been completely erratic. At first, everything was delayed, and now it's difficult. Some things happen lightning fast, and some things are happening really slowly. But caregiver, the government announced that they're going to work on more of these, but we're still not seeing any huge shift in terms of processing times.
So very unpredictable at this point.
Yes.
What about workers that are already here, that are under the old program, and they're applying and trying to receive their permanent residency and to sponsor their children, their spouses? Have there been delays in that over the past year and a bit?
So right now, the only program, or the primary program open for caregivers is this one. The previous programs are not accepting applications anymore, but if someone is already in Canada and has worked for 2 years, they can now apply under this new program. So the one we're seeing from the live-in caregiver is there are still just straggling through the system. They applied years ago and they're still making their way through. But if someone is looking to apply now, if you already have 2 years of work experience in Canada as a caregiver, even if you didn't pre-apply through this program, you can apply now. So someone came on a work permit through another program entirely, like they studied in Canada at college, they graduated, got an open work permit, they worked as a caregiver, they can now apply through this program. You don't have to have that pre-approval. You can, if you are here and just through some other means gained work experience as a caregiver, you can apply through this. But I also wanted to mention, because I don't know if everyone will be aware of this, there is right now, for a limited period, a program called Temporary Residence to Permanent Residence Pathway. It is really a COVID-specific program. The government is trying to get a lot of new permanent residents landed this year, a record number over previous years. And they have been opening up new programs for this purpose. And one of them is this program, Temporary Residence to Permanent Residence Pathway. They're trying to help people who are here as workers get permanent resident status. And there's a few streams into the program, but one of them is for healthcare occupations, and it includes caregivers. It's not only for caregivers, there's some other healthcare occupations, like there's some nursing related occupations, social and community service workers, other occupations assisting in public health. And to qualify for this, the worker needs to pass an English language test only with a level 4. So the caregiver program is a level 5. This program is a level 4. They need to have 1 year of work experience in one of the eligible occupations. So it includes caregiver, as I said, nursing and some others. So 1 year of experience in the past 3 years. And they have to be working in Canada at the time they apply. And as long as they meet those requirements, they can apply. This is a time-limited program. There's a cap. Once the cap is met, that's the end of the program. It's really just right now to help people who are in Canada working as temporary workers during COVID transition to permanent residence. And it's even meant largely for occupations that were considered essential during COVID. So people who were working, and there were some construction and trades ones, and there's some under healthcare. There was also another stream for international students, which is already maxed out. But right now the healthcare one is open and it includes caregiver. And I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but it is a good option because it only requires 1 year work experience, a lower language test, and it will close soon. It will be finished. There's a cap on it.
Any idea on when it's going to be maxed out, or when the limitation's going to run out in this program?
I can look at the numbers, but they were, I think it was maybe sort of around halfway. So if people are interested, they should apply. They should look at applying soon. And there also say there could be some other options depending. Caregiver, because it's considered in immigration world what's called an unskilled occupation. So the options for permanent residents are limited, but there can be others too. So if someone doesn't fit either of these programs, there can be other options. Like we've sometimes helped caregivers who for whatever reason fell short of the requirements for permanent residence apply under humanitarian and compassionate factors, which is kind of a catch-all. Like I don't meet the requirements of anything else, but I'm established in Canada. I'm going to face hardship if I have to leave. And we've had some success with those applications. So if someone finds like, I don't meet these, I don't know if I will, it is really worth getting legal advice to find out maybe if there's a way they could meet them, or is there another category that you might be eligible to apply under?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, we're sort of limited in time here, but you've provided so much information so far, and it sounds like there are so many different streams, so many different options. This isn't black and white. There are lots of other factors to consider and circumstances. And so, anyone who comes to me with immigration questions, I immediately tell them that it's always best to retain counsel to get legal advice, because the last thing you want to do is mess up an application or have your application delayed for any number of reasons. And so my sense of things is that the earlier you get a lawyer to assist you with the process, the better it is, and the faster you're going to get through the process. Is that, would you agree with that, Aisling? Would you say that it's good to get a lawyer as early in the process as possible?
I do, and at least to get advice, because you don't want to miss a program that you weren't aware of. And immigration is constantly becoming more complex. Like when I started out, there was a small number of programs. Now they're announcing new programs really all the time. And so the requirements are becoming more complex for them. So at minimum, getting the consultation, the advice to find out what are your options, what is the strategy, and then it's really up to the person to decide, I want to actually retain a lawyer to assist me through the process. Do I feel comfortable doing it on my own? People have different feelings about that, but at least at minimum, getting that advice to know what is the best strategy for you, what is the best option, so that you're not missing something. Like if people aren't aware, for example, that temporary residents to permanent residents, they're waiting on to meet the 2 years of the other program and might not even know that this is an option for them.
Potential option for them, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of our listeners are touched by immigration issues or interested in immigration issues. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, but just before we do, can you just remind our listeners how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, for sure. So again, my email, it's my first name, Aisling, AISLING, @bondiimmigration.com. Our website, www.bondiimmigration.com. Also, if you Google my name, you'll find my website. It's not a very common name, so you'll find my website and my contact information pretty quickly if you just put my name into Google search browser. Engine.
And I can't stress enough how important it is to seek legal advice with whatever legal issue you have, be it immigration, personal injury, contract law, and any type of legal matter. It's really important that you get some legal advice as early on as possible, but especially in issues relating to immigration, where most people do have loved ones back at home, children, spouses that they're trying to bring and sponsor into the country. And so it's just, I've seen firsthand, unfortunately, the kind of delays that a lot of people in the caregiving programs have dealt with, and the unfortunate circumstances of people that have gone through the program and for whatever reason find out at the end that they can't sponsor their family. And so for those reasons, I very highly encourage all of our listeners who have immigration law issues to contact a lawyer right away. Contact Aisling. I'm sure she'd be happy to discuss your case with you and provide you with some legal advice. So let's go to a quick commercial break, and we'll see you shortly.
Our company is committed to providing truthful, honest, competent, and result-oriented service through advising and representing our clients in Canada and overseas in a wide range of immigration matters. We focus on providing support, building dependable relationships, and promoting success. We are dedicated to understanding what results you want, to helping you understand what actions we can take on your behalf. Good evening and welcome back to the Hoffman Law Show.
My name is Jennifer Hoffman. I am your host and the principal lawyer at Hoffman Law, where we deal with all matters of personal injury and disability. Today on our show, we have a special guest, Aisling Bondi. She is an immigration lawyer and the principal lawyer at Bondi Immigration Law. We've spent quite a bit of time chatting about the caregiver program. I know that in particular is something that is of high interest to a lot of our viewers. I've had quite a few viewers and listeners write in and ask about immigration issues and specifically about the caregiving program. And so it's a pleasure having you on our show today. Thank you. We have just a little bit more time left, and I wanted to ask you, for people who are already in the country and are already part of the program, do you have any tips or strategies for individuals who are in Canada who are either seeking to get their permanent residency, I mean, aside from this new program that we just discussed, and or are trying to sponsor some of their family members from overseas?
So one really important tip is to be very mindful of your status. Don't let your status lapse, because so if you're here on a work permit, it happens sometimes that someone forgets that the work permit is going to expire. They don't really, pay attention. They file an application to extend. It's incomplete. It's really important to maintain your status. If your status does lapse, sometimes you can get it back. Sometimes you can't. It can be quite difficult. So it's really important to be aware of that. Note when your permit is going to expire and be certain to be prepared to file the extension. You can file an extension up to the date your application expires, but you don't usually want to put yourself in that situation. And you want to make sure that you're eligible to apply for extension and you have what you need to do so. Status is really important factor. Also be mindful of what your work permit does and doesn't permit. So if you have a work permit that lets you work only as a caregiver, you need to be really careful that you're not taking work in another field, because you would be running afoul of that work permit. If your work permit is specific to an employer, making sure you're only working for that employer. Some people have an open work permit that allows them to work in any field, but you want to be just very mindful of that. If you're here and your family is not, you want to look at options, because into this new program, there is the option of bringing family to Canada. Some people might have come not realizing that. So you'd want to look at, is your family eligible? So again, talking about spouse and kids, to come to Canada while you're still working. In some cases, that will be an option. In some cases, it's not. So those are important tips to keep in mind. And also, if your family is not eligible for some reason, like you're looking to, someone is here as a caregiver, maybe they've obtained permanent residence, they're looking at helping a family member come to Canada, a sibling, a parent, there are other immigration programs available. And so again, it could, if that's something you're interested in, there's not just caregiver, there's certainly other programs out there. There's so many, I couldn't touch on them in the few minutes left, or even in really an hour session. But it can be a good idea to get legal advice and see what options might be available for them. A big one we see these days, people coming as an international student. So applying to study in Canada, it really opens up a lot of immigration options if you do that. There are, in some cases, there's the ability to work while studying, to work after graduation, and then qualify for permanent residence that way. So a lot of reasons to if you are looking to bring family here, get that advice on what options might be best for them. And it's really individualized. It's going to depend always on the person's level of education, work experience. Do they have work opportunities in Canada, family ties here, to determine whether there might be an option for them to apply for permanent residence or a work permit, study permit.
Okay, and just so our listeners know, Aisling, you do a lot of work with the caregiving program, but you also work in all areas of immigration. Is that correct?
Yes, my work covers all areas, but also at our office, because we're 4 lawyers, there's some of us who work sort of in more areas than others. So depending on what application type someone would be the best fit for, usually be placed to work with a lawyer who specializes more in that area. Immigration is so complex now that increasingly people are even specializing somewhat within immigration law in certain fields or areas of it.
And you obviously have the resources to be able to assist in what sounds like all areas of immigration and find the right fit depending on an individual's specific needs.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. It was really great to have you, really informative. I know for sure that many of our listeners would find this information incredibly useful. I really do encourage our listeners to reach out to Aisling if you have any immigration-related questions. You can reach her at 416-847-3605. You can also email her at aisling@bondiimmigration.com. Aisling is spelled AISLING, and you can also find her website online at bondiimmigration.com. And I thank you very much, Aisling, for being here tonight and for guiding us through some of the available programs and some of the changes that we've seen over the past couple of years with respect to the caregiving program. And I know that a lot of our viewers may reach out about that and other questions related to immigration. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. I hope people find the information useful and helpful.
I have no doubt that this was a particularly useful segment for a lot of our listeners. And thank you so much. And have a great evening. For anyone who has any legal questions related to tonight's show or to personal injury and disability, our listeners know where to find us. You can reach me anytime at 416-631-0000, extension 1, and I'd be happy to connect you with Aisling as well. And you can always reach us at jhoffman@hoffmanlaw.ca or go to our website, www.hoffmanlaw.ca. Thank you again, Aisling, and it was a pleasure speaking with you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.